I guess I've had experiences where I've been in relationships where it's secret, and and I've also had the experience of being in a relationship where it's fully transparent and accepting. And I can say without a doubt that when there's full transparency, within my experience, without a doubt, I can say that, not for everyone, with full transparency and communication, when I'm able to express the challenges that I'm sort of mentally wrestling, then the need to hide or the need to go and soothe myself through this behavior just disappears, it dissolves. And so I learned that expression and transparency was the pathway out of this rather than internalizing and trying to shame and guilt myself. However, I'm also fortunate that two of the nervous systems, like two of the major relationships that have been in my life during this process of being fully away from porn, there were two nervous systems that completely were okay and accepting of that. And without that acceptance and holding and acknowledgement and willingness to not take it personally, because that is the hardest part for the partner of the porn addict to accept that this isn't something personal. And yet it's hard. It's easy to say it, but it's hard to really accept that. So this is why, again, therapeutic support for both partners is so important. And again, back to my story, I was lucky that I found that stumbled across two nervous systems that were okay with my expression, which made it easier to be fully abstinent because anytime there was a need and I would just express, hey, this is what's happening for me right now. And they would just say, yeah, okay, thanks for sharing. I really appreciate you being honest. And then all of a sudden, oof, like all of a sudden the shame is gone. I'm being accepted and there's no need to go watch porn.
This is just my observation, and I'm curious to know your thoughts on it. But I I feel like I've observed that it's almost the secrecy itself that's part of like the juice that makes it so good about the porn or whatever the addiction is.
Yeah, and it's because it's stuck in the mind and we're ruminating it, but as soon as we express it, we allow ourselves to feel the full extent of this experience. And for the most part, once we express, this is also the case with much of the pain that we're avoiding in our life. We're so fearful because we think it's going to be so bad, so we don't go there. But when we actually do allow ourselves to surrender to the experience that we're avoiding, one of the common experiences that you sort of think, oh, was that it? I mean, it's not comfortable. It is painful, but it's like, oh, I could I could do that. That wasn't as challenging or impossible as I thought. And the same thing happens with expression. We're hiding this thing, we're ruminating on it, we're spending so much mental energy trying to keep this thing hidden. And simply by expressing and just communicating it and getting it out of our head, we experience the immediate relief. We soften, we let go of that tension and constriction that was required to keep this thing bottled up. Again, which is why transparency and open communication is so vital and important in relationships. Because if we accumulate these little things, these little secrets, no matter how small, we're just building this rigid structure around our experience and around ourselves that prevent us from connecting with and being with the person in front of us.
So, Lou, this is actually bringing up a thought from my past. A close friend of mine from childhood died from her opioid addiction. And I remember her saying back in the fairly early days when we were teenagers, her saying that having this secret and being able to like go into the bathroom and use and kind of be like, screw you to all those people out there.
Yeah.
Like she actually found that empowering. And I imagine there's a certain aspect of that when it comes to the secrecy associated with porn. And so what do you think it takes for a person to be willing to let go
Mm.
of that?
Well, it's a really interesting dynamic that you've brought up because something similar happened in my own experience when I moved away from porn and I reflected on my use. Again, when you move away from something and you become still, it gives you that space to reflect, which is another reason why I'm a big fan of stillness. But for me, what I discovered was that indeed that it was my secret little fuck you to the world. And it wasn't a fuck you to the world. It was specific to the relationship I was in because I didn't know how to communicate and how to be emotionally vulnerable and how to be transparent and how to assertively express my needs and how to demonstrate and put in place a boundary, because I didn't have those skills, then me watching porn was my passive aggressive rebellion and fuck you. Well, I'll go show you. I'll punish you in this way, of course. Then it just eroded my own sense of self and it eroded their relationship. So whenever there was, I went through these cyclical patterns. I write about it in my book. One of the things about my book is it isn't just studies. It's my own healing journey, because I think that through stories we make healing more relatable and we make it possible for people to see how others journey through this. And for me, witnessing this cycle of, you know, beginning of a relationship, being abstinent from porn, 6 months into it, all of a sudden the honeymoon period is over, the fireworks are fizzling out, and now you have to be a real person. And I didn't have the skill set to be a real person in a relationship. I didn't know how to express it. I didn't know what an emotion was. I didn't know how to communicate. I didn't know how to be vulnerable. I didn't know who I was. I didn't understand myself. So how was I supposed to um, express myself in relationships? So then porn became my crutch for whenever I felt attacked and I didn't know how to respond, and or a boundary was crossed and I didn't know how to respond, or I had a need unmet and I didn't know how to express it. So then porn became my outlet. So yes, I can relate to that. Um, and the antidote was, and for me, maybe, I took the, I tend to dive into the deep end. So I just like, cool, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do it fully and see what happens. And for me, the antidote was absolute just authenticity, expression, and transparency. So much so that first dates were never the same. They were the coolest experience to just be fully myself and transparent. And then knowing within a few minutes, hey, this person doesn't we don't resonate. And that's a good thing to know at the beginning, rather than trying to people please, rather than trying to do this act, rather than trying to do these things. In fact, I never liked, and I hate the word dating, because it implies this performance or this act or this like this way of doing things. And for me, that was the antithesis of who I wanted to be and how I wanted to be in the world moving forward, which was, this is me. These are my needs. This is who I am. This is who I'm not. And this is what I'm willing to accept or not accept. And when things, I remember being able to, for the first time in my life, have something happen to me. And, usually we let those things slide on a first date, or something that offends us or something that happens. And I remember it clearly, that on a first date, someone was late 40 minutes, and that really irritated me. And in the past, I'd have been, oh, cool, let's just go, but instead I said, hey, and I expressed like the value of sort of how that had impacted me, what I took it to me. And it was like the first time I'd expressed it. And the person I was with on that date said, yeah, wow, thank you for sharing that. No one's ever told me how that impacts them, and I really appreciate you sharing. It turned into a moment of connection, because I was able to firstly express a boundary and express a need, rather than, you know, push it down in the hopes that I could just, keep it to myself. But that would only, again, that would be planting the first seed of resentment in the relationship. And then that's where the relationship would start from.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I think that's going to be valuable for a lot of people. And because I know in my own personal life, like I don't get it perfect all the time, but I do find that I'm much more able to articulate, and I don't swallow those things. And I find that it's hard to meet people who are willing to be authentic and to speak up. And the thing is that if that woman had been like, well, that's so rude of you to say la 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 la, well, yeah, I mean, it might have ruined the date, but great. You never have
Yes,
to see this person again. That's
yes, no.
fantastic.
In fact, it is great. If she had had that reaction, great. And because she was open and welcoming to it, great as well. I mean, both are great, because we discover the truth of what's actually happening here. Because at that point in my life, I had realized I want to meet someone that is transparent, open, communicative, vulnerable, and emotionally aware. How could I seek those things if I wasn't going to embody and practice them myself and lead the way in those ways and with those skills and qualities? So, yeah.
Obviously it's wonderful that she responded so well. It's just that if someone, our fear often is, well, what if they don't respond well? Well, then you have more information. And
Yes.
if you're able to share, hey, this really bothered me, and then you see that she actually was appreciative of you sharing, like you said, that's actually, now you're experiencing true intimacy, rather than you holding it in for 2 years and then finally saying, you know what, I hate that you're always 40 minutes late. And she's had no idea for all this time. Now you're ending the relationship.
Yes, absolutely right. And I like the way you described it. It's more information. You get to see how this person responds to a need being met. You see how they respond to stress. You see how the two of you navigate the situation together. So much information emerges when we are triggered, which is it might be a subconscious or maybe conscious guilty pleasure, but I think I'm known amongst my peer group and my friends that I'm the person that goes in and triggers, and I maybe it is unconscious, maybe it's intentional, but I do like to see how people respond, and I get to see their authenticity come out in a way. Like, let's see what's actually happening here. Let's be real and see how we can navigate this real situation rather than through niceties and those sorts of things.
Well, I mean, there's people who don't really see the real side of their partner until, a year into marriage and they're living together and you have kids on the way. And now you've got to blow up your entire life when
Yes.
all along, if you'd just been authentic, you would have either been able to work through it and build something real, or you would have realized you're not a match and gone your separate ways.
Yeah. And that requires a lot of courage and vulnerability and a lot of work to be able to do that. And I can appreciate that because I had the same thought and the same intention. If I'm if I don't want to keep cycling through the same pattern anymore. I want to do it right. So the only way I'm going to be able to do that is if I'm real from step one.
So, Luke, was there anywhere? I mean, it's easy to just say, well, just be yourself, be real, but was there any source of where you learned how to do that?
Well, it's, when again, it's a combination of all the teachings and learnings and teachers, and it's the perfect storm of the right the practices that you choose, but also a sprinkle of faith, right? We don't sometimes get to choose when these things sort of transpire and happen. However, for me, one of the things that I became aware of that was happening within relationship was my people pleasing, right? So without boundaries or the ability to assert myself, then my default was people pleasing. And with people pleasing, the practice that I took on, and I had to turn it into a game. I literally had to sort of say, "Ooh, I wonder if I can do it." I had to like playfully engage in this game and notice the opportunities when someone in front of me held an opinion of me that I didn't agree with, that was negative of me, that I wanted to change, and to practice sitting with it and saying, I will not change their mind about what they think of me unless they ask me. Otherwise, I will let them keep their opinion of me, and I will not try to please them or try to shift their opinion of me in order to soothe myself. And that was hard. But after doing it a few times, just a small number of times, like after 3 times, and I'm not exaggerating, it's just the first 3 times that are really hard. But once you give yourself the experience of passing through that if I want to be authentically myself, I need to allow the other person to be authentically themselves. And if in this moment they authentically need to believe this about me, let's leave that there. It is exactly as it's meant to be. And to practice that settling and to practice that acceptance was hugely transformative because all of a sudden I could be okay in a space where I'm not trying to entertain and please and perform in everyone. I just be okay in my own skin and being comfortable with that. That was huge because that skill and capacity also translated into relationships and friendships. So it allowed me to be more authentically myself and show up and actually find real friendships rather than a wide circle of people that I superficial connection with. It actually turned into a small group of individuals who I forged deep connections with because there was this foundation of authenticity and vulnerability and expression.
Thank you, Luke. I have similar experiences where I used to try, and if people had the wrong idea, I would go out of my way. I might spend all day trying to reassure them, no, this is like a misunderstanding. I'm not that person you're thinking I am. And usually at the end of the day, they still had that opinion. And I had invested all of this time and energy and just completely drained myself, all in an effort to convince someone who I probably didn't even care about that much personally. So I imagine it's been a big time saver and energy saver for you. It has been for me.
It's exactly what happened. You just have so much more energy to give to the relationships that do matter and the relationships that are showing up. Again, and it's also in line with many of the philosophies and the teachings that I've come across that we can't control these things, that we have the practice of acceptance. All these practices and teachings really come to the surface, even in a tiny little moment of someone having an opinion of you that you don't like. In that moment, all of these teachings have the potential of liberating and freeing us from our preconceived notions to really allow the present moment to be as it is, to really accept ourselves and to because if we held the belief that we are fundamentally good enough as we are, then that person's opinion doesn't affect us, and yet here it is affecting us. So again, it's this opportunity to feed a new belief, an opportunity to embody universal teachings that many of us would agree with if intellectually, but again, when we're faced with the emotional trigger in the moment, it's a little more challenging to practice, but well worth it if we can lean in.
So, Luke, do you still, I imagine that under certain circumstances and with certain people, those triggers still
Of
come up
course,
of wanting to please and
of
wanting
course.
to prove your worth. Yeah.
Yeah, of course. And the difference is the different, and this is true. It was true of the porn use with the participants, and it's true of this with me. When it's the conscious choice, it's not stressful anymore. So when it's a subconscious people pleasing, it tears away at our sense of self. If we know who we are, and there's moments where I'm just like, you know what, in this moment, I'm choosing to do this. One of the environments is as a facilitator of CI, I'm genuinely motivated and inspired to really help and be present for every single participant. And that's the sort of the hat I put on when I'm a facilitator. In everyday life, in social situations, I'm far more detached from whether or not this person is going to accept me or not. It's easy to go to social situations and just be present with whatever almost comes my way rather than trying to seek being accepted or seek approval, if that makes sense. So I suppose so it depends on context and whether or not I'm choosing and I'm conscious of that decision to want to please, because I think at the heart of who I am, I believe myself to be a kind, generous, giving person, but I want it to be my conscious choice to do those things rather than a subconscious reaction. So it transforms what I consider to be a weakness, which is people pleasing. And now I can almost say, well, I am a people pleaser, but I do it consciously when I choose to, and I enjoy it because I enjoy giving and serving others.
Thank you. That actually brought up some realization for me. Thank you, because yeah, I find that I almost have this compulsion to do like the right thing or to help. And when I'm able to step back and sometimes even choose not to immediately offer help that I don't have the bandwidth to give, as one example, then if I am offering compassion or kindness or generosity, I'm doing it consciously, not compulsively.
Yes, and there's a difference, and I think that makes all the difference, to do it consciously and compassionately rather than unconsciously, impulsively, compulsively.
Yeah. And that brings it back to the same thing with the porn. When you consciously choose to watch porn, or when your participants had the what they got out of it and the side effects were not, yeah, it was a much more positive experience when it was conscious rather than compulsive, and they couldn't control it.
Exactly right.
Thank you. So I want to bring it back to the nervous systems. I just feel like some people might question when you were being more authentic and about porn usage, you found nervous systems that were able to support you through that. So what did you mean when you said that?
I meant that a human being whose reaction didn't overtake their response to what it was being shared. So every one of us has our own unique conditioning based on our life experiences through childhood, through media, through religion, through parents, through peers, through early relationships, even through adult relationships, that really shapes who we are and it really forges. And even through the interactions we have through movement and food and sleep, that's all going to impact how we show up and how our body is showing up to the present moment. So the nervous system, where they were easily triggered, And the nervous systems, when I refer to that, to the nervous system that I came into contact with, that I was fortunate enough to come into contact with, maybe there was a trigger, maybe there was a discomfort to hear of what was being spoken, but then the capacity to take responsibility for that experience, that this is my nervous system that's having the response, and to not take it personally and be present with me as I expressed in the same way that, of course, I intend to do for others. I think that the greatest gift we do give another nervous system is simply presence, and to not allow our nervous system experience to leak into the space without sort of unintentionally or in a form of projection or in the form of judgment. So to me, it's when I say nervous system, I'm referring to a collection of reactions and conditioning that this human body has accumulated over their lifetime as a result of their lived experience.
So I'm going to be interviewing another psychologist, Dr. Stan Tatkin, in a few weeks, and he talks about co-regulating nervous systems, where in a couple, yes, we're responsible for our nervous system, and we also take some responsibility for supporting our partner in regulating their nervous system. So we do it together. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yes. Well, it's again, um, every relationship and context within a relationship is different. So to say that it should be one way might be a mistake, because certain relationships work and it may not work. When we hear how it works for them, we may be in complete disagreement, you and I, based on what they believe works for their relationship. But one interpretation is that yes, we are responsible to a certain degree, or to a certain degree of holding the other's nervous system. This is why couples therapy is so powerful, because then you have the couple going into a space with a therapist who, professionally trained and hopefully has done the work for themselves, can help co-regulate this joint nervous system in front of them, because they themselves are a calm presence. So indeed, when we're in relationship with someone, I maybe the wrong word is ideally, but what a beautiful experience it can be if one person who's calm and present can be present while the other nervous system is triggered and activated and is projecting and maybe even attacking. If the second nervous system can be calm and still and be present, that will immediately begin softening the experience of the other nervous system. If we react, then all of a sudden we have escalation and an argument, and we've got the back and forth of defensiveness and so on. However, we can contribute to co-regulation if we stay embodied in ourselves. And again, this is where the practices that we talked about very early in this session, whether it's journaling, nature, yoga, breathwork, meditation, massage, cold exposure, whatever it is, whatever allows us to get comfortable and cultivating the capacity of soothing our nervous system, that is uniquely beneficial and powerful when we bring that gift into relationship with others, when they're able to come to us in a distressed state. They're shaking. Here's this nervous system shaking. You just come as this calm presence, and immediately both nervous systems begin to soften and align, because we are being calm and still within ourselves. So yes, I agree that co-regulation is a beautiful ideal that is possible for relationships. But again, I can't say that it's this universal goal that every relationship should have, because again, every relationship and every person is on their own path, and the motivations, inspirations, and reason for being in that relationships are different from person to person. So this, I don't want to use it as a point of judgment or anything along those lines, if that makes sense.
No, that's fair enough. Thank you. I appreciate that. Thanks, Luke. So I'm just wondering, so Soma Wise, Get Out of Your Head and Into Your Body is the name of the book. And your website is lukesniewski.com. And I will post the link to that in the description of this video. I'm just wondering, for the last few minutes of the show, what do you think is important that viewers take home with them?
Um, to me, I think we're going to go back to the beginning of the interview and the interview that we've had today, and to get out of the head and get into the body. And I think whatever practices that we can lean on, that we can have access to, in fact, the more the merrier. I know that personally, I have a plethora of practices that I can lean on that allow me to come back to myself, whether that's exercise, swimming, dancing, cold exposure, sauna. Um, it's I want to make sure that I have a lot of options, because if I only have one option, I might get into the same challenge and problem and struggle that I had with porn. So that was the diversity of methods and portals back to the body. So I guess we can call each one of these practices a portal. Any portal or practice that allows you to come out of the head and into the body, um, continue to lean on and cultivate that connection with self.
Oh, thank you so much for your time, Luke. It's been such a pleasure speaking with you, and I really appreciate you being so open about your own journey and experience with porn use, because not a lot of people are talking about it in such a compassionate and authentic way. So thank you so much.
Thank you. I think we've got to lead by example if we want the world to be more vulnerable and open.
Absolutely. Sending you lots of love. If you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up. Make sure to subscribe and check out one of these lovely videos. Thanks for being part of this community, and we'll see you next time.